Hi, everybody. Mark with the North Florida Bicycle Club. And today I thought I'd talk a little bit about speed because speed is something that comes up all the time. We're hard pressed not to find rides where people are riding too fast, too slow. We talk about speed a lot, but speed is actually pretty much one of the worst indicators of how good the ride was, really. Now, you ever been on a ride? People say, well, we averaged X miles per hour, we killed it, or we averaged X miles per hour that we didn't do very well. Maybe, maybe not. So I'm going to show you an example from a ride I recently did, the Thursday Durban ride. It was February 2025 as I'm recording this. And here are three 5-mile segments that we did. The first one, if I can move my finger a little bit, you can see we averaged 20.4 miles per hour. My average heart rate was 107, and my average power output, which was a measure of effort, was 143. We had a fairly large group. I think there are about 10 people in the group and a tailwind. Now, everything varies for everybody, but for me, that's a pretty low heart rate and a fairly low power output. Heart rate and power are not comparable between people, so that's for me. Shortly after that, we turned on to 16A, meaning we went into the headwind. We had a smaller group. We divided into two groups. We had about 6 people in that headwind. You can see our pace dropped to 16.4 for a 5-mile segment. That's a 20% reduction in our speed, but my heart rate went up to 113 on average, and my power was up 37% to 196, significantly more effort. So although the speed dropped by 20%, the effort was up by 37%. And then later on, towards the end of the ride, it was just David and I were the only 2 people at that point in time. And for a 5-mile segment, we averaged 17.2. It was sometimes headwind, sometimes tailwind in there. My heart rate was 125 and power was 202. Now, the reason the heart rate and power were higher were a couple of reasons. Number one, it's towards the end of the ride. Sometimes you're getting a little more tired. Number two, I was doing all the pulling, so I was up front. You don't have that chance to get in the back and brake. But as you can see, looking at those paces versus the heart rate and power, pace is very rarely, really not at all, telling you the story of how hard was this ride, did I get more fit, less fit, and everything else. So let me talk about the ways you might really judge what the effort is on a ride. The best way is power, because power is very objective and it happens right away. If you have a power meter, as soon as you go uphill, downhill, into the wind, tailwind, your power changes instantly. It's very objective, it's very quick. The problem with power is it's very expensive. I would guess only a small percentage of people in the club have a power meter. I'm not suggesting you go out and buy a power meter. Really, unless you're going to be doing some training, the power meter is not a good investment. They're very expensive, but the fact remains the power meter is the best way to really judge what your effort was like. Now, the second best way, and people are going to say heart rate. No, I think there's a better way than heart rate, and that is by rating of perceived exertion, RPE. The problem is it's subjective. It's also free. RPE is generally a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is like, this is incredibly easy. I could do this all day long, and 10 is as hard as it can possibly be. I can do this for 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm going to be gone. But kind of judging how it feels, a lot of times use your breath for that. Why do I say that's better than heart rate, but not as good as power? Well, power is objective. RPE is going to be very subjective. But RPE is also very real time. Same thing. You hit that downhill, you hit that headwind. You're going to feel that difference right away. Heart rate, while it's objective and relatively inexpensive, is a lagging indicator. Meaning when you first turn into that headwind, your heart rate at first still is low. It will climb over minutes or however your fitness level. Same thing, uphill, downhill, your heart rate doesn't respond right away. It takes a while for it to respond. When you start throwing stop signs and stoplights in there, it's even a little bit harder. So I like heart rate. I think it's a good metric. I just don't think it's as good as perceived exertion because it lags too much how I'm going to feel. And then finally, we have speed, which is what we tend to use all the time. The problem is speed is just too varied. It's relatively expensive. I think most of us probably have speed and most of us can track by that. But the elevation, stop signs, stop lights, how many people in the group, there are just so many things that will affect what your speed is going to be. And as I showed at the very beginning, speed doesn't tell the story. Heart rate and power are even better judges. So we'll probably continue to watch speed. We all use it, but we shouldn't be married to it because there are other better ways to judge how we're doing.